Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm very excited today because we have the Bracebridge Horticultural Society with us and they'll be doing a Q&A.
Good day, fellow gardeners. I'm Nancy Thompson. I'm president of the Bracebridge Horticultural Society. As you can see by the little inserts, Bracebridge Horticultural Society is part of District 18 of the Ontario Horticultural Association, which is also called Gardening Ontario. And we're here today to give you a little bit of information about gardening.
This is Sharon Davis. I am the treasurer of our Horticultural Society, and I'm looking forward to this afternoon, a new experience for me, and I hope for those that will be watching, we hope to give you some information with regards to gardening. Hey Nance, what is your favorite gardening aid?
Oh, my husband.
And luckily he's been around a lot lately to help, hasn't he? Do you ever ask him to help weed your gardens?
Oh my, no. You know, I did it one time, and I didn't really ask him, but I used to complain about gardening all the time. And then last year, my son and I bought him a special birthday present. And now he said he's happy to garden, but I won't ask him. We bought him a little bulldozer, and he said, one pass, and it would be gone. So I never asked him. But going back to your first question, you said my gardening aid.
Yes.
One of my favorite gardening tools is this little doohickey. I don't know what it's called, but it's really good for getting in amongst the flowers and the vegetables and getting out the weeds and that. It's kept quite sharp and it's wonderful. A good friend in horticulture gave it to me. So it's really my favorite tool. I wouldn't call Brian that, but no, he's my aid and this is my tool.
I don't have one, Nance. I'm going to look for one now.
Which? Is a husband or tool?
No, I think I'll look for the tool.
Oh.
What on earth are you wearing, Nancy?
Well, a hat for the shade, but this is really my Easter bonnet. But this year I wore a toque because it was so cold. And of course we should all wear gardening gloves. These are well used. If you're gardening in Muskoka, probably any garden, especially this year, you should dress in layers. And you might have another hat part. And I wear the hat because my hair is such a mess. And then you should start with many layers that you're using.
Especially in the morning when it's cool.
Oh
and
yes,
as
definitely.
the day progresses. Yeah.
And you know, for the bugs too.
Do consider watching for ticks.
Yes. You know, Lyme disease is such a problem, and it's in Muskoka too, and it's starting any time now. So if you do have long sleeves, long pants, socks tucked over your top, gloves, hat, I'm really not being that ridiculous. It's something to be concerned about. And of course, I don't know how much blood you can give to our lovely black flies and mosquitoes before you get faint in the garden.
So starting into our program, I've got a question for Nancy, and it says, why don't my tulips bloom?
Mine don't bloom because the deer eat them, or the mice eat them. But I'm assuming that you're talking the tulips come up and just have those lovely leaves, as you can see in the little picture, and they're not blooming. There's quite a few reasons. Remember that tulips originally were in a very dry, sort of cold mountain climate, and there it needed that coldness to help set, and the leaves had to stay intact to sort of feed the bulb and that type of thing. Well, in our Muskoka garden, sometimes you have a hot spring and sometimes a wet spring, and the same in the fall, and it may not feed the bulbs quite the same way. And also tulips can age, so the older tulips, if they haven't formed the little babies on the side, may not work as well either. So basically, if you leave the bulbs intact, and if the weather is good, and if the animals don't get them, and if you do give them a little bit of, she's laughing at me, a little bit of fertilizer, such as, I think it's potassium I had written down there, or phosphorus, it would sort of help definitely.
Awesome.
Now, to keep the deer from eating them, I often sprinkle blood meal on top. But then that brought the skunks in to dig them up. So really, it makes it an interesting thing. But if you have tulips that come up, you're lucky. If you have tulips that come up and bloom, you're blessed.
Absolutely. Yes, we planted 1,500, or helped to plant, 1,500 of the 150 tulip bulbs in our garden on the main street here. And I don't recall seeing very many of those come up the following year. So So another question for you, Nance. When is the best time of day to water your vegetable garden?
People have quite a few conversations on this type of thing. I've always thought the morning was the best time, and really early morning before the sun gets up too high. It gives the leaves a chance to dry off a bit before the sun hits them, and make sure you give it a good deep watering. Now some people can't do that in the morning if they have to go to work or just doesn't fit their schedule. So then the second best time to water would be in the late afternoon, early evening, once the sun's lost a lot of its strength. And then you could give them a good deep watering again. But make sure that the leaves dry off before the night comes, or you'll end up with that really awful looking sooty mold and all that stuff on it. So preferably in the morning if at all possible. The very, very best way to water a garden, whether vegetables or flowers, is basically with the weeping hose.
Yes.
You know, not one that spurts up, but one that just weeps.
And when we're using that regular hose to do the spray as opposed to the jet.
Another question that we received, which is a good one too, is what type of plants would be best to plant in shade? The lady that asked us that suggests quite a number of hosta, which you know have lovely flowers too, but there's not as much color as you might like. So what kind of flowers could you plant in fairly deep shade that would give some color, some sparkle to the garden?
And we have a little list here. Some of those plants would help that situation out. So perennials for shade would be the following: astilbe, bee balm, bellflowers, bleeding heart, forget-me-not, foxglove, hellebora, hydrangea, Jacob's ladder, lily of the valley, monk's hood, and wolf's bane, and primroses and violets. So those would be perennial ones. So when you visit your garden center, you could look for these annuals, and they would be alyssum, begonia, calendula, fuchsia, impatiens, larkspur, lobella, nicotiana, pansy, and snapdragon. White flowers will bring sparkle and brightness to a dim area of your yard. Try alyssum, astilbe, begonia, coral bells, drawkwort, heliotrope, impatiens, and lily of the valley. Good luck with your search for those ones.
And mentioning things like lily of the valley, I wouldn't put too much of it in because it does spread tremendously. So for any new gardeners, be careful with that one. One question that often comes up, and now this will be aired, I gather, the first week or two of June, and people will often ask, can I still plant seeds in my garden? Is it too late this year? Sharon, what do you think?
It is not too late, especially with some of your vegetables, and I know vegetables are a very strong point this particular season. So those such as your beans and your peas can be certainly planted directly into the soil, and you'll still have great produce, or great fruits, vegetable, come through at the end of the season. So, I mean, if you wanted an earlier crop, then you could certainly plant prior to, but they still couldn't go out into the soil until after the last frost.
My grandmother and my mother, both in Muskoka, never said you should plant a Muskoka garden until the first full moon, or the full moon in June, which of course is this year's June 5th. So I mean, you've still got lots of time. The other thing my Muskoka grandmother used to say is the best time to plant potatoes was when the lilies were blooming and when the black flies are at their very best or worst. You know, she said you could always go by that. So you still have time to plant. Now, the way our climate is changing, our springs seem to be either wet and cold or horrendously hot or wet and cold or both. So quite often the fall is a much better time. So if the garden's planted a little bit later, you may find that you're actually being able to harvest things well into September and October, where when I was growing up, August was pretty much the end of things.
Yes, my tomatoes last year were really late in ripening to the red color, very late into the fall, and yet they were still delicious.
When we gardened up in Kirkland Lake, we lived there for a long time, my ambition was to get a red tomato on the vine. It never happened until my husband Brian put up a greenhouse for me. And then I finally got a pink tomato and I was so proud. However, things like peas and lettuce and that type of thing can be planted continually too. So when you're close to one crop, put another one in, and then you'll always have a great harvest coming. We had one question that said, I bought some seeds, but I don't know when and where and how to plant them.
Having purchased your seeds, I presume from one of our local stores, on the back of the package for the seed, it will give you the directions as to the timing of the germination of the seed, the location with requirements as far as sun and water are concerned. So just follow those, and they'll certainly help you to produce the plant that you want or the fruit that you want.
That sounds good. So when in doubt, read the package. When have you ever heard that? Read the instructions. Some seeds do need to be soaked overnight. Some they suggest you leave in the fridge overnight, and some you even nick a little bit on the seed casing to help them grow. And that should tell you all that sort of stuff on the package, plus how big they should get. I did ask Donna Wallace, who is really our horticultural guru when it comes to vegetables and plants of all sorts. And one question different people have asked is, how many vegetable plants should I put in for a family of 2 or 4 or something like that? Now Donna, as our go-to expert, suggested beets. She planted a double row of beets about 6 feet long. So if you like beets, they're so good for the actual beet and the beet tops. And my mother used to say, if you plant beets where you plant the carrots, then the beets will come up and they'll show you where you put your carrots. Because carrots are kind of a long time coming.
They are. Mine are just poking through.
Yeah. And then for peas, for snap peas, she said, put them on either side of a fence if you make a little hydro fence of that, 2 or 3 feet long. Beans, 4 rows planted, and again, separating them for 2 to 3 weeks type thing, separating them. 8 seeds of pole beans, which isn't very many because you get quite a few in a package. And I used to plant the whole package and I never used them all. Although now they could go to the food bank and things like that. Corn, Donna suggested that unless you have a lot of room, don't plant corn because it needs a lot of space. And if you do plant it, you usually get about 2 cobs per seed, if you like, so you can plant it that way. And if you plant the sweet corn in a block rather than a nice long skinny row, put them all together, it's better for them than pollinating and this type of thing. Now this year I'm trying popcorn, which grows the same way as the regular corn and looks much the same when you dry it on the stalk. So it's just something different to try. Carrots was another thing, a 6-foot row, Donna said was probably good. And again, if you put some beets with that, it helps. Leaf lettuce, spinach or chard, 6-foot row should be lots. And again, like the beans, do a 2nd or even a 3rd planting. And often these can be planted late in August and you'll still harvest into the fall. Tomatoes, and Donna says, unless you're a tomato hound like she is, 2 indeterminate or 3 bush plants. Now, do you know what indeterminate tomatoes are?
No, I do not. I read that.
Oh, okay. I think it's the kind that continuously blossom and are continuously producing tomatoes. Or some of them, they put out so many blossoms and that's as much, then the tomatoes will keep growing, but that they won't make any new ones. And possibly a grape or a cherry tomato, or those lovely little sweet millions and things like that. And cucumbers, 6 to 8 seeds or plants will produce enough for a couple. Although if you have kids who like cukes, you might want a few more. And those you plant in a little mound. The same with squash and pumpkin and all that, depending on what room you have. Another question I had, and it's sort of coming up. Someone wrote in and asked about, they have a lovely lily garden, lots of Asiatic and Oriental lilies, this type of thing. And they have those pretty little red bugs on it. Do you know anything about those, Sharon?
That dear sweet lily beetle, does get onto the lilies, and the only way, truly, that you can possibly get rid of them, the best way, is to take them individually in your fingers and either place them into a glass bowl. I use Jabex or soap and water, or squeeze them. If you've got your rubber gloves on, they'll just kind of wipe off. Do any of those kind of things, but you have to be very strong about going out each day and looking at your plants to make sure that you are removing them continually until they disappear.
The larvae of these very pretty little voracious insects sort of roll themselves in their own poo, so they don't look like anything edible when the birds come. So if you see these little dark bumps on as well as the red beetles, take those off, because that's what it is. Another thing you can use is that diatomaceous earth. It's sort of a sharp earth, and if you spread that around the bottom of your lilies, as they crawl over it, it sort of...
Yeah, it's like the slugs.
Yeah, it's good for slugs as well on your hosta, under your hosta. And they said spraying with neem oil. Now, I've never tried it. I tried to get some in the Home Hardware the other day, and they didn't have any, but they said spraying the lilies with neem oil might help too. Yeah. That's N-E-E-M, that type of oil. But if you don't do that, you don't have any lilies. I love lilies.
I was just going to say, I love lilies too, and so you have to be persistent with regards to the beetles.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah. It's a bit about picking them off. Although by the 500th beetle, you get used to it. So enjoy yourself.
So a picture was received of a flower that an individual had taken, and she had found this in Severn Bridge, beside a bridge, and she just didn't know what it was. So we needed to go on a search because immediately no one could say what it was. And so we were lucky enough to find this particular flower. This is the individual picture, and this is it as a cluster. And the name of this particular flower is a butter burr. And it's found to be native to Asia, or South Africa, South Europe, along riverbanks, marsh, or ditch, and has been, on occasion, used medicinally. So this particular plant then has traveled quite a distance. So perhaps you could let us know whether or not you have seen this particular flower in the area that you live in.
Whatever you plant, I hope you really enjoy it and have fun in a garden. You know, they say you don't need anything much else in life except a library and a garden. So really, happy gardening.
Happy gardening to each and every one. Thank you very much.